All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this session on hearing me talk about how I developed the ChatGPT workshop in response to the evolving AI technologies that we've been experiencing. By the end of the session, you will have some strategies on how you may develop your own ChatGPT workshop for your audience. And it doesn't matter which library setting you work at, whether that's an academic library, school library, or public library, maybe even a special library. I think some of the information that you take away today, you'll be able to apply it and develop a really good workshop for your patrons or for your users. But I'm coming at it from an academic library context, so bear that in mind. Our focus is in the post-secondary education type of domain. To set the stage, I thought it would be good to go over my institution, the University of Alberta, just to kind of give everyone the lay of the land. How large is our university? What exactly are we talking about here? So hi, everyone. My name is Janice Kung, and I am a health sciences librarian at the University of Alberta. Thank you so much for joining the session. I hope we'll have some really good discussions at the end of it. So the University of Alberta, we are located in Edmonton, Alberta. And for those of you who are not as familiar with the Canadian geography, we're located on the western part of Canada, and we are right there. We're right above Montana. And the University of Alberta is the top 4 Canadian university. We're ranked top 100 in the world. We have approximately 41,000 students across 5 campuses. So we are a rather research-intensive university in Canada. And the problem that we encountered, I'm sure many of you encountered, was all the way back in 2022, there was a little tool that was launched to the public called ChatGPT. I don't know if many of you have heard of that tool. So that really changed the landscape of how we operated as libraries, as staff, and we received quite a number of AI-related questions that came into the library, and the library staff were really having difficulty trying to field those questions. And at the same time, when this happened, there was also a task force that was created at the university where they looked at AI and the learning environment. The work that came out of that task force was really useful, but it was useful only for the instructors. They provided a lot of really good guidance material on how instructors could navigate this landscape of having all of the new generative AI tools coming at the forefront. So there were resources on how they can integrate ChatGPT or other generative AI tools into their classroom. Would they even allow it? So there's language on how they could write a statement in their course syllabi and all that good stuff. However, all of the resources were really geared towards instructors and faculty. And I found that there were very few resources or training available for the students, for our learners, both undergraduate and graduate students. And at that point, I had my light bulb moment. I thought that the library was well positioned to fill that gap and to provide workshops to educate students about generative AI, particularly ChatGPT, because that was the flavor of the month, so to speak. So then I kind of went into my planning phase of how to develop this workshop for our learners. And the first phase was kind of my learning. And since ChatGPT was launched in November of 2022, that was really when my learning also started. And I was very fortunate because I have a partner and he works in IT. So he told me, keep an eye out on this. This is big. This is going to change a lot of things. And I listened. And so at that time, very early on, before ChatGPT was huge, I did a lot of reading, research. I played around in ChatGPT a lot. I attended a lot of workshops. Some of you in the audience today, I've even learned from you. So thank you so much. So I did a lot of learning, went to workshops, to mini conferences such as this one. and try to absorb everything like a sponge. And I'm still learning. So the learning is an ongoing process. And once I had a good handle on things, I thought, okay, this is now the time to develop something that I can deliver as a workshop to our students. And that's when I went to phase 2. I drafted an outline. I thought carefully about the content that I wanted to include. And I also borrowed from many amazing presenters that I learned from. And I kind of added them into the workshop. And I developed a presentation called ChatGPT 101, Introduction to Generative AI. Once I developed that workshop, I was speaking with some library colleagues, and they thought it would be such a great idea for me to present this workshop to our library staff because they also needed to learn about these things in order to field those questions from the students. And I thought that is a fantastic idea. So I developed the presentation in the summer of 2023. And because of this suggestion, I made my practice session or my dress rehearsal, I tell people, to the library staff in late summer of last year. So about August, September time, 2023. And that worked for two things. Not only did library staff learn about ChatGPT, but I also was able to get their feedback on the session and try to make some improvements before it went live, before I actually offered the session to our students. So that was really meaningful. After going through these planning phases, I think you're all really interested in the development phase. So I'll spend more time today talking about how I drafted that outline, what information I included in that workshop. Some of the things I considered was to have a hook at the beginning, because especially when you're in an online setting or even in person, you know how there's that awkwardness at the beginning where people aren't really talking, they're just waiting around for the workshop to happen. And I thought this would be a really good idea to have like an introductory activity or an introductory exercise for them to look at or think about before we even got started. And so the hook that I used was I had 2 prompts from ChatGPT. And then the question I had that I posed was, which is real and which is fake? And then so one was, I think it was like pop culture, something about the Avengers. And then the other question was a prompt about our university colors. So there was an explanation of why are the colors for the University of Alberta green and gold. So they read through it and then they just put in the chat whether or not they felt either or was fake or both were fake or both were real, that kind of thing. So that was really good to have that hook at the beginning. And then we went through with the rest of the workshop. So I thought that was good. Then I included some AI foundation type of information, talked about some definitions, especially the ones that pertained to generative AI, such as large language models or LLMs. So that was really good to kind of set the tone again of what we're talking about for the session. Also to talk about the different types of AI and to also ask and pose the question to the audience where they think ChatGPT sits in terms of what type of AI it is. So we try to, alleviate the fears, calm the anxieties that we're not quite at the Terminator, Black Mirror times yet. So I thought that was really good. And then I think it's also important to think about talking to the audience on how large language models work. I think it's really important for the audience to understand how it's returning the responses to us as humans. So it's important for them to know the data sources and why we call it a probabilistic text prediction tool or a word calculator. So using these analogies so that they have a better understanding of how it works under the hood. And then the majority of the workshop, I thought it was really important to talk about the practical applications. Again, for our university, the focus was more towards undergraduate and graduate students. So I provided some prompt examples of what they could ask ChatGPT to help them with studying, with their literature reviews, that kind of thing. So lots of examples. And then I used the CLEAR framework to kind of underpin the examples. The CLEAR framework was something that was coined by Dr. Leo Lowe. So attending one of his sessions, I learned from that and I stole it, but I also gave him credit. But I think it's important to kind of use the existing frameworks that are out there to make it easier for the audience to understand. And finally, also discussing the strengths and limitations of ChatGPT for your audience. So again, for us, for students, talking about where it could be really useful for their learning, but also where they should not be using it, because then that might not be the best use of it, or they might be kind of moving more towards cheating territory. So lots of these things for people to think about. The next part of the workshop I thought would be really important to discuss would be evaluation. How should they take this information when it's being generated by these tools? So the critical thinking is really important, and I think people need to still understand this, that there is misinformation because there's bias inherently in the data set. And of course, there's hallucinations where it's making stuff up. So they need to have this good understanding of why it's happening and to be aware of it. And it's not as advanced as some media outlets would have us believe. And we need to just inform our users about that we still need to use our brains, unfortunately. The last piece I think is really important to talk about would be the ethical considerations, because there are issues with using generative AI tools such as ChatGPT, including copyright issues that is still not resolved in the courts, the environmental costs, and job displacement, privacy, data security from users, lots and lots of things you can talk about here. And I think that generated a lot of really interesting discussion in the session when we went into that part of the workshop. So these are just some things that I thought would be important to cover in a workshop about ChatGPT or generative AI. But I'm happy to get other feedback as well, because I think this is like a living workshop that it needs to be constantly tweaked and revised just because of how fast AI is moving in this space. So let's talk about how I actually implemented this workshop. I offered the workshop twice, one time in the fall of last year, and then one time in February. So you can see they were offered online on Zoom. And you can also see the number of participants that attended, and also how many people actually completed the evaluation form, which was wonderful. And all of the sessions were 1 hour in length. And that was a conscious decision because I wanted to ensure that it wasn't too long, especially for an online workshop or event that people, they kind of lose or they fade in terms of their attention span. So I thought, oh, it should not be more than an hour. But we'll talk about that in a moment in terms of the duration of the workshop. So you can see that it generated a lot of responses for the evaluation form, which I was really shocked by, because again, I'm used to doing library workshops where maybe 1 or 2 people complete the evaluation form. So I felt like a rock star, like Taylor Swift territory over here. So the next time I plan to offer it is in May next month. Again, it will be online and it will be targeted towards graduate and postdoctoral students based on a demand by the graduate and postdoctoral office. So they thought that it would be really useful for them to have this workshop offered to them. And so that was how I implemented it. And I look forward to continuing to offer it in the coming years, just because I don't think this is going away anytime soon. So now I'm going to share with you the evaluation form on the questions I asked and what the responses were, because you can learn from my experiences or my mistakes or my successes. So let's look at the responses. The first thing that I asked was which department or faculty that they were affiliated with, because I think for us, especially in the academic environment, it's always really interesting to know who's coming to these library workshops. You can see that there was a wide range of faculties and departments that were covered. So there's a lot of interest across the board, across all disciplines, which I thought was really interesting. Most of the people who attended were students. They were undergraduate and graduate students. However, there were also faculty members, staff, and some retired faculty that attended. So I thought that was really interesting. And The next question I asked was, what did you like about the session? So you can see that many of them were very happy with it. They mentioned that it was informative, it was clear, there were lots of good, helpful examples. And so that was very affirming for me. I thought, okay, good, I'm doing something right here. So that was good. But on the flip side, we also have to talk about the negative. So I asked what could be improved with the session. And some of the responses mentioned that they would like more examples. I thought I provided a sufficient number of examples, but they want more, which is completely fair. They also wanted more time for questions. And so again, that was the balancing act of having a session long enough, but not too long for online, and also allow enough time for participants to participate and to ask questions. So I might have to think about that and tweak it some more, because there was that feedback that they wish they had more time. Another feedback that I thought was really good, I think positive as well, that they wish that we could make a series out of it. For example, ChatGPT 201, 301. So I think that was very positive in that there is an appetite for more content about this. And a colleague and I, we are working on developing another ChatGPT workshop geared towards research on how can students or researchers use ChatGPT for research purposes. And there was also another comment on having more interactive activities, which is a really good, sobering comment, because I do try to incorporate interactive activities and exercises, but perhaps I need to revisit and do more of that, because to keep the engagement of the participants. So I thought that was really good. So some things to think about for sure. There are things that I can improve upon. Absolutely. So the last thing I would like to share with all of you is I have a gift for all of you. I have made the complete presentation available under a Creative Commons license, and I will put it in the chat right now. And you are free to copy, download it, revise and remix it, and do what you would like with it to make your own ChatGPT session for your audience, whether that's general public, students in a school, or your own academic setting. I think it would be really helpful for you to start with something, so you don't have to start from scratch, right? We're all busy. So I thought that would be a really good takeaway, that you can now remix, revise it to your needs. And that is all I have for you all. Thank you so much for attending, and I welcome any questions that you may have at this time. Oh, and you're welcome. Yes, excellent. So people are happy. Good. Oh, thank you. Good questions. Okay, so Nicole asked, can you tell us about the interactive activities? Excellent. Okay. I will actually show you. Give me a moment here. Is there a way for me to share? I will go into my slides from the presentation. Okay, so can you see my slide? I just want to make sure it's still presenting. Yes, thank you. Okay. This was my very first slide of the session before I even began. So that was my hook, right? So this was kind of interactive at the beginning of the workshop, just to tell them to type in the chat. Okay, tell me which one's false, A or B. And then they would type it in the chat, and then that generated some conversation, which I thought was so fascinating, because some people said, oh, it has to be A is false because this, or B is false is because of this, or they're both false. So that was kind of interesting, and it kind of generated some interesting conversations even before I started the workshop. So that was one of the interactive activities I did. The other one was when I talked about the different types of AI, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And so here I had a poll that popped up in Zoom that asked them, where do you think ChatGPT is currently at right now? Stage 1, 2, or 3? And this was also fascinating, because many people think it's stage 3. Some also think stage 2. but it's actually stage 1. So I think that was eye-opening. That was another really good interactive activity. And then when I talked about the ethical concerns, that component, I only gave a couple. I think I gave 1 or 2 or 3, I can't remember. And then I threw it out to the group. I said, what other ethical concerns can you think of? And I think that also had people participate and put in the chat. So I hope that answers your question, Nicole, but thank you so much for that. So I did try to put in some questions, polls, surveys throughout. Robin has a question. What questions did your workshop attendees have? Okay, that's a great question. So one of the questions that came up was, what's the difference between the free version ChatGPT versus the paid version? So GPT-4. So that was a really good question. And I didn't have a good answer because I didn't pay for it. I did not experiment with the paid version. However, the audience, other people who attended that workshop, they chimed in, which I love because I love it's such a community-based type of thing, right? And then so someone chimed in and said, oh, I have GPT-4 and it's better. And then so we had more discussion about that. So those are the main questions that that came to mind. There are several others, but I hope that answers it. There's another question here. How do you manage different understandings or levels of knowledge about how ChatGPT works? That is a great question. The workshop is designed for absolute beginners, which is why it's called ChatGPT 101. But I recognize that there could be people in attending who are way more advanced about it than I am, which is perfectly fair. I think for me, because I'm used to doing library workshops, that you know how sometimes you get those people that they're like, oh, I know more than you, which I'm just like, yes, I welcome it, because I always come at a place from learning that I don't know everything. And so I think from that, we also have really good discussion with the audience, but you kind of have to know like how to navigate that, especially with people who might know more than us, because we just work at the library, right? So that is a really good point. What do you focus on when updating your presentation? That's a great question. So in terms of what I change in the presentation, for example, I do have a slide on the major players. So I had to change the slide because where I'm in Canadian context. So for us, there are some tools where we do not have access to in Canada, and tools, they change, the names change. So that's where I do have to go in and make those tweaks. For example, Microsoft Bing Chat changed their name to Copilot. Google, they also rebranded to Google Gemini. So these kinds of like minor tweaks that I do make, but I do my best because you're right. This space is changing so fast, this landscape, that I can't keep up. But where I do read about new things, I do make those updates and those tweaks where possible. So those are really good questions. There's another question in the chat. How did you advertise your workshop? At our university, we have like a massive digest, an email digest that goes out to the university community. There are different digests for different groups. For example, there's one for students, one for academic staff, and university staff. And I advertise mainly through there, also on social media, because I'm on Twitter X. I do advertise through there, and I know that some people in the university are also in that space. So that's my two main ways of advertising. Our library, we also have a social media team. So I pushed it out to them. I said, oh, would you mind advertising this workshop that's coming up? And so they also push it out to all of our social media channels. So that's a good question, because you know how it's always hard to recruit people to attend, right? And I think those are all the questions. Let's see. Yes. Oh, Monica has a question. Does faculty offer extra credit if their students attend? Great question. To my knowledge, no. It's completely optional for whoever wants to register and show up. But no, there are no extra credit, or there are no perks, unfortunately, for them. They just show up because they want to learn. Uh, what was the reaction of faculty or other administrators to using this workshop for students? That's an interesting question. I think mostly it was very positive. We have an instruction librarian. I can't remember her title exactly. So she's system-wide learning, like at the high level of how we are being integrated into all forms of learning at the university. So she sits on all of these system-wide committees. So she's been sharing, relaying that, oh, the library, we are offering these workshops, and we have been receiving really positive responses that, oh, they're so glad someone's doing this. Because again, there was really little content available for students. And so it was really good. I think the responses have been really good. Do you have faculty asking for this type of instruction within their classes? Yes and no. I think because for some of the faculties that I provide the liaison services with, their curriculums are so jam-packed that there's no room really for a whole session about generative AI tools. But when I do my library instruction, because I'm in health, we do a lot of evidence-based practice type of workshops. And when I do those workshops, I bring up ChatGPT. I do make a mention of it for a few minutes to talk about the dangers of them using it as learners. So I do mention it briefly, but there aren't entire classes about it. But maybe in the near future, who knows? And I hope I was able to address everyone's questions. I'm just going back here. Oh, okay, sorry, I'm just going back up in the chat here. Are there other AI products that you would want to include in the future in addition to ChatGPT? That's a great question. There are other generative AI tools that are out there, especially for the one about research, right? That workshop. So maybe it shouldn't just be about ChatGPT. We should highlight other types of tools as well, such as Perplexity, Elicit. There are other tools in this space. So that is a really good point that perhaps I should consider incorporating other types of tools, not just ChatGPT. Okay, I hope I was able to answer everyone's questions. If not, that's okay. You can reach out to me by email. I love having these questions and I welcome that conversation. If you have suggestions on how I can improve this workshop, I would love to hear from you. And thanks again so much, everyone, for attending. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And please attend the other sessions.